So the second half of section 4.7 is on what to do with negative mixed numbers and how to do the operations on them. So first of all, let's look at letter A here. Write negative 1 7/8 as an improper fraction. This is a common mistake that's made because of the negative. Sometimes students do 8 times negative 1 plus 7 and get negative 1/8. But instead you need to do 8 times 1 is 8, plus 7 is 15/8, and just bring the negative down. Okay? So just pretend like the negative's out in front, do 8 times 1 plus 7 gives you 15/8. Same with letter B. 7 times 9 is 63. Plus 3 would be 66 over 7, that should say. It looks like it got cut off. So that should be negative 66 over 7. Same thing if you go in the other direction. Negative 37/8. You say, how many times does 8 go into 37? Well, it goes in there 4 times. 8 times 4 is 32, with 5 left over. So it would be 4 5/8, and because it was negative, it stays negative 4 5/8. Same with negative 46/5. 5 goes into 46 9 times, but that's only 45. So there's 1/5 left over, and it's negative because the original problem was negative. So we're going to need to use that to multiply, divide, add, and subtract our negative mixed numbers. So first of all, let's look at letter A, negative 4 2/5 times 1 3/11. So for our estimate, this would be negative 4 times 1. So we know we should get an answer close to negative 4. So remember, to multiply fractions, first you have to convert them to improper fractions, to multiply mixed numbers. So this is where the mistake is made. Remember, do 5 times 4 is 20, plus 2 is 22/5, and it is negative because the problem was negative. 11 times 1 is 11, plus 3 gives us 14 over 11. Now we can multiply straight across. Remember, a negative times a positive will give us a negative. Reduce first. 5 and 14 doesn't reduce, but 11 goes into 11 once. 11 goes into 22 twice. 2 times 14 is 28. 5 times 1 is 5. So it's negative 28/5, which is the same thing as negative 5 3/5. Okay, 5 goes into 28 5 times, with 3 left over, and remember it's negative. So our estimate here wasn't very close. It was kind of close. Because we had to round both of them down, we were a little off. So let's do letter B, negative 5 1/3, divided by negative 2 1/2. So this would be about negative 5 divided by negative 2, or negative 3 would be our estimate, which would be 5/3, or 1 2/3. It is positive because it's a negative divided by a negative. That is our estimate. We should get an answer close to 1 2/3. So again, to divide fractions, you write them as improper. To divide mixed numbers, 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16 over 3. Remember, it's negative. Divided by 2 times 2 plus 1 is 5/2, and that's negative. To divide fractions, we flip and multiply. So we multiply by negative 2/5. Remember to reduce first if you can, which you can't. 16 times 2 is 32, and 3 times 5 is 15. A negative times a negative is a positive. 15 goes into 32 twice, with 2 left over. So 2 2/15, which is a little bit close to our 1 2/3 estimate. So that's how you multiply and divide negative mixed numbers. Next, I'm going to erase the board so we can do the adding and subtracting ones, which are the ones where students have the most trouble. So letter C says 6 2/3 plus negative 12 3/4. This is where these estimates that we've been doing are going to come in really handy. 6 2/3 rounds to 7. So let's do our estimate first. This would be 7 plus negative 13. Negative 12 3/4 rounds to negative 13. If you're going to do this problem, 7 plus negative 13, those are different signs. So when we add problems numbers with different signs, remember we subtract them and keep the sign of the larger. So you do 13 minus 7 is 6, and it would be negative because the larger number is negative. So that's going to tell us how to do this problem. We need to subtract the larger number minus the smaller number and keep the sign, which would be negative. So to do this problem, we're going to do 12 3/4 minus 6 2/3, because our estimate said to add a positive number with a negative number, we subtract the larger one minus the smaller one, their absolute values, and keep the sign of the larger. So we're going to do 12 3/4 minus 6 2/3. Just remember at the end our answer has to be negative because the larger number was a negative. Let me know if you have questions on it. Sometimes that's confusing. So to do this again, you get a common denominator of 12. So that would be 9/12 and 8/12. Multiply by 4, multiply by 3. Now you can subtract them. You get 1/12. And 12 minus 6 is 6. So the answer would be negative 6 and 1/12, which was really close to our estimate of negative 6. Now, if you would have accidentally added these together and got negative 18 or something else, you would have known by the estimate that it couldn't have been right. Okay, so let's do one more of these together, letter D, and then we'll have you try letter E on your own. So letter D says negative 11 5/6 minus 20 4/9. So I see a minus sign right away. Let's switch it to plus a negative. Now let's do our estimate, as it'll tell us what to do. Negative 11 5/6 estimates to negative 12. 20 4/9 is closest to negative 20. So negative 12 plus negative 20, to do that problem, they're the same signs. So we add their absolute values. 12 and 20 is 32. And keep the sign. So our estimate is negative 32. We should get an answer close to negative 32. So our estimate said, since they're both negative, we actually need to add them together and keep the sign. So for our problem, we need to add 11 5/6 plus 20 4/9. Just remember at the end, the answer has to be negative, because a negative plus a negative add up to a bigger negative. Okay, so that tells us what to do. We add their absolute values. Remember the answer, we're going to keep the sign, and it's going to be negative. Okay, so I'm going to cruise through this a little bit. Get your common denominator of 18. 6 times 3 is 18, so 5 times 3 is 15. 9 times 2 is 18, so 4 times 2 is 8. Add them together. 15 and 8 makes 23 over 18. Whoops. And 11 plus 20 is 31. So we get 31 23/18. Remember, this is improper. 18 goes into 23 one time with 5/18 left over. Add that to our 31. So we get 32 5/18. And don't forget a negative plus a negative adds up to a negative like we had here. So it's negative 32 5/18, which we can check by our estimate. We should have got something close to negative 32. So that looks about right. So again, that estimate is important. Use your estimate to figure out, do I need to subtract the numbers or do I need to add the numbers? Remember, if they're different signs, you subtract the larger one minus the smaller one, their absolute value. You keep the sign of the larger. If they're the same sign, you add their absolute values and keep the sign. Okay, so why don't you try letter E from your handout and bring that to class, and bring any other questions you have from section 4.7. Thank you.